Give everyone's attention, please. This is quite a group we have up here. First of all, I want to welcome everybody to this special program tonight, 1980s Sports Reunion. I only have a couple of jobs. One is to tell you there's a couple fire exits, one in the back of the room, one through the door here and out through the front. And you can use them in case of a fire or in case Tom Burns talks too long. So you have a choice either way. Now, 1980s was a pretty good year for state championship teams. At St. Paul, 1980, we had boys soccer, Coach Lodovico. We also had 1988 boys basketball with, I think, Coach Steratore, right? I think Franny was the coach. Bristol Central, 1985, we had softball with Phil Perrott, coach. And 1985, wrestling, Dennis Fickman. Dennis is in Florida right now, but we have the assistant coach here, Pat Prenti. Hopefully he'll have a few good stories about that. Bristol Eastern, 1983 and 1987, girls basketball. 1986, baseball, Coach Giovinazzo. 1987, girls volleyball. 1988, football, Coach Mills. Where's Dave? He's over there, okay? And then we had American Legion Baseball, 83 and 84, state champs. And 84 made it all the way to the World Series. And we got Tom Burns here, maybe to say a few words. And we also had, I think it was, where's Greenleaf? Was it 1985 McKay Waters went to the Little League World Series?
84.
84. So 1984, McKay Waters, Little League, went to state, regional, and made it to the Little League World Series. Now, when I was talking to Jerry Ann Bradley yesterday, and I told her that Tom was going to be speaking tonight, the first thing she said is, "You guys are very brave to give him a microphone." That was her words, so I don't know. We'll see what happens. So I want to thank Bob Freeman and Dave Mills for putting this program on. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to our co-chairman of our business program, Bob Freeman.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for coming this evening for the 80s event. I'd like to introduce the panel, but before I do, give you a little background here. We're going to do a little 5-minute presentation for each panelist, and then we'll open it up to the audience, roundtable discussion. First on my right here, we have Stacy Mills Rivara from Bristol Eastern High School, class of '88. Charles Chinky Driscoll, Bristol Eastern High School, class of '82. Thomas Burns, class of 1939. Bristol American Legion World Series participant, class of 1984. Coach Tony Lodovico, St. Paul High School. Tom Legassi, St. Paul High School, class of '82. Jim Danis, Bristol Central, class of '82. And Coach Bill Pirrock, Bristol Central High School, class of 1962. So we'll start with ladies before gentlemen. Stacy's agreed to kick it off, and we'll turn it over to Stacy. 5 minutes, Stacy.
Okay, thank you. I think that one of the things when you talk about the 80s and my experience in high school, I think one of the most impactful things is that we were committed to our athletic programs in the high school. We didn't have other athletics to distract us. We were committed to our teams. So when we were in basketball, we were in basketball season. When we were in volleyball, we were in volleyball season. When we were in tennis, we were in tennis season. And that created a great team atmosphere because we were all committed to one another, and we had great success because of it. We had a lot of athletes. I was able to play on 2 state championship teams. Volleyball, I was playing with Lauren Ferrier. I was playing with my future sister-in-law, Melanie Buchanan, Gina Kakamo, Chrissy Adams, Cheryl Kazmarczyk, Kathy Ferrier. Those are all big names when we were playing, and they were all committed to our team, which was a really great thing for all of us. In basketball, we had Laura Lishness, we had Bernice LaFerrier, Amy Gagnon, Jen Mead. There were so many people, so many friendships that were built because we were committed to one another. We didn't necessarily have jobs outside of our school commitments, and there was a lot of school spirit as well. We had a lot of friends that came to our game all the time. There were huge crowds that came, and we went to theirs, and there was this mutual respect for one another and appreciation for the commitment that we were putting into our team and how much school spirit we all had. I just remember that because we were not committed to so many things, that when we had summertime, that would be our time that we would play at the park. We would be playing outdoor basketball. We might play a little volleyball. I was fortunate enough to have wonderful coaches that really modeled how I would want to be a coach. I had Gail, I had Coach Floyd, Coach Chauvin. They were invested in us as much as we were invested in them. And it was just a really positive experience. I think that when I look back on my career as an athlete in high school, I have great memories. I have great friendships that were created from that. And I have a lot to draw from. When I became a coach, a lot of those experiences helped me to make good choices when I became a coach, to understand how to lay out the framework of a successful team. And that was because I had great coaches, I had great teammates, and I earned the success that we had because we were committed to working hard for each other. So I think if that's my biggest takeaway from the 80s is the fact that I was fortunate enough to play with wonderful athletes, and I was fortunate enough to have committed, devoted, knowledgeable coaches that really set a path for us that was very successful. And then I think we formed a lot of friendships, and the school spirit really helped push us to achieve a lot of our goals.
Nice job. Right to left, Jake. Right to left.
Public speaking is a problem. It's funny, you need a beer? No, I'm good. My name in Bristol is Chinky, and after I left Bristol, I went to college, and then my professional career, nobody ever called me Chinky. A couple people, my close people knew the name, but nobody ever called me Chinky. When I come back to Bristol, it's Chinky, Chinky, Chinky. When they say Charlie Driscoll, they're like, "Oh, your dad taught. Dad was a teacher in high school." So it's fun when that name comes up. So I played baseball, basketball growing up in Bristol. Actually played, my coach was Mr. Greenfield, Giamatti. And we worked all the way up through the middle school, summer programs, and then we got to high school, and it was a different world, playing high school basketball and baseball. Number one, our coaches were phenomenal. For basketball, it was Mr. Bates, and for baseball, it was Mr. Giovanazzo. But starting freshman year, our class was very talented, and I think they kept 15 guys on the freshman team. And there was 3 of us. We didn't get a uniform. We had t-shirts. Mr. Bristol's on our board. After about the first week or 2, guys who had t-shirts quit. I kept sticking it out. And then once grades came out, a couple more guys. And all of a sudden, boom, I have a uniform. And stuck it out freshman year, and I was small, I was tiny, and ended up playing JV, and then junior and senior year, I was playing varsity, and our junior year in Bristol Eastern, we went to state finals in basketball with Mr. Bates, and then baseball with Mike Giovanazzo. And the experience, I mean, to this day, still talk about it. It lives with you forever. The people at Bristol Eastern, coaches, Mr. Mills, the people that you looked up to, Mr. Tidros here, is absolutely phenomenal. And when you say the name Bristol around, outside of Bristol, you were like my college friends, this and that, everybody knows Bristol as a sports town. It's absolutely phenomenal. And the experiences that I had, unbelievable. I'll talk about my baseball coach because he's here, Mike Giovanazzo. Phenomenal coach. I heard they had some decent baseball coaches in Plainville, but that was kind of a rumor. But I played for him for 4 years, and then when I got out of college, he was coaching the basketball team. And we ran into each other, and a freshman job opened up, and I took it. And I coached him for probably close to 20 years. And that's just from my experience playing for him, and just being a mentor, and just saying, you just want to follow that lead. And we have at least 18 to 20 years of coaching together, which was phenomenal. Basketball-wise, Mr. Bates, he was a different story. You didn't get too close to Mr. Bates. I'm sure there's some stories I can tell, but I can't tell it in public. But he was like ahead of his time. Like absolutely brilliant. We were doing things on a basketball court that nobody else was doing. And I mean, you talk about Mr. Bates, and he coached Legion basketball, and everybody talks about how phenomenal the coach he was. And those are the people that I looked up to my whole life, still do, and it's definitely the Bristol roots.
Chicken, with Coach Bates' offense, how many times per game did you get to shoot?
It was less than one.
Great. Coach, at the beginning of the game, he used to tell Chink and the other guards, don't bother getting in the layup lines, just go out to half court and throw.
That's true.
Coach Burns.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the invite, Hal. When you called me, I was in the tub. But I thought you were calling me to say I got into the Hall of Fame, but that's probably the plan. So I was excited at first, and then you said, oh, yeah, you're speaking. There's 10 other people speaking. And, that must be real important. So anyway, thank you anyway, because I don't get out of the house. I don't got to watch Netflix tonight. My wife will be happy about that. I got off the couch and a little longer because I'm moving. But you guys, I see the people here now. You guys you're my heroes. You're my competitors. You're everything to me. And I look around and I go, oh my God. And I can't tell who you all are because you don't look the same. Because you look different until you say something. Like Chinky just, come on, that's Chinky. I'm the gassy. I don't know them guys. I don't hear that. I was afraid of him. Like you all were. And if you ain't afraid of me, you better be. But I do want to say thank you to so many people who made my life possible, and I ended up being able to coach with the Olympic program in Australia, Division I baseball, played against Roger Clemens in the World Series, only because I wasn't good enough to play. No. So then I said, I got better. But what happened is, when I was growing up, because of Little League, I was thinking about, why are we so good at this? And I said, well, the feeder programs, such like that Bob Watson guy, now that I read about these guys, and the Cardinals had that coach, I don't know his name, but those guys were tough, McCabe Waters. And then growing up, yeah, it's that's it. And then growing up, then you get Tony Carrier, you get a coach that's not really normal when you're in high school, and you go, and then you don't ever want to coach, because you don't want to be like him. But then I got Coach Moylan, who gave me a chance as I never pitched. I was a senior. I pitched one game. Started one game in high school. I didn't mean to go, but this is the 70s I'm talking about. Sorry, guys, we're supposed to talk about the 80s. But no, these are the people that made it possible for me to coach in Legion at the age of 21. And that was a real smart move on that start at 21 years old. Tom Moylan put me in the game, bases loaded, St. Paul, Muzzy Field. Easier. Mike Cogden's up back and forth. He knows I never throw a ball. Of course, I throw so slow that it can't be a ball. So it's like 3-1 to count. I throw 1, 2, 3, Cogden falls off. Here, I'm telling the story. This is crazy. So anyway, he hits a soft line near the third, and we're up 1 run, like 7th inning. And Mike Roberts catches it in foul territory. So the guy at third should have been off the bag, and he stepped on the bag, double play, yes. And that was my first feeling of good. I might have a girlfriend now after this game, because that's the only reason we play sports. The only reason we play sports in the first place is so the girls dig you. So, if nobody told you that, you know it in your heart. Look at y'all laughing. Go ahead. It was like this. So then I pitched against St. Paul again. They went to the state championship that year. We beat them again. We beat them again. So, and then I also beat you in the soccer team too. And then, and the last thing was No, and then against Platt, that's right, it's my 5 minutes up now. And against Platt High School, last game of the season, we're 8-9, you gotta be 9-9 back then to get in the tournament, and I hadn't started the game, but McCooley must have said, well, we had to win, well, anyway, I'll let Birds pitch. So I pitched that game, 2 or 3 hitter, we used to play 9 innings, and so that made me think that I could actually be somebody. But I want to just hit real quick. Tom Dick, I'll thank you for letting me be a coach in your senior pony league with the Tigers. Chinky was my second baseman. That's why we didn't win a game. She said sure. Oh, you play short? Should have played short. That's for sure. And there's more over here in our neighborhood. By the way, when you grew up in Bristol, you got so many great athletes in your neighborhood. Mark Ziotis was up the street. I think it's Melrose or Cherry. Those guys up there. And you guys in 1974, when you went to Pier 2, when you went to the World Series, I was, of course, I'm sitting at the American Legion listening, and we had BIS radio and all that stuff, and then Chapolis, of course, strikes out with the base loaded. But he goes, but you guys, that was unbelievable. And then for me to be able to be the coach of Legion team, that was a miracle. So, but there's more people here too. If I didn't get to you, as the coach, one of my coaches, I'll get to you later.
Thank you. Good evening. I want to thank the committee for inviting me here this evening. Tommy Legassi was very helpful. And it's great to see all of you. Hello? The funny thing about it is I'm going to reminisce a little bit. Probably the best thing that happened to me in the city of Bristol was the Bristol and the Forestville Boys Club. They were phenomenal. And I grew up in the Boys Club. I grew up in the, as Phil knows, I grew up in the Boys Club. Many of you grew up in the Boys Club. Many of you grew up in the Bristol Forest Boys Club. And we were competing against each other and so forth. And we had great, great coaches there. We were reminiscing about some of them before. Carlton Berkshire. Remember him, you guys? Norm Vealman. Really, really good people. Really good people. And that's how I grew up. I grew up in a boys' club. And my mother and father used to say to me, what do you want to do when you grow up? Well, I like the boys' club. They're not going to get any money there. But I said, I want to be your coach. I want to be a teacher. So the rest is history. My parents were able to save some monies for us, my brothers and I went to college and I became a teacher and coach. And the funny thing about all this, it's going to connect. My first job was at Stafford Springs High School, little town, North Park. Does that ring a bell? Taught there. We taught there.
Once they fired you,
How the hell they hired me? So I went there, and I taught there for 2 years. I knew nothing that St. Paul was being built. I was in love with my wife. We just got married. I had a little child, a little girl, and I loved life. I loved it. And I was coaching soccer at Stafford Springs High School. Then all of a sudden, I got a phone call. And it was Don Perno. Don Perno, as you know who he is. And if you get a chance, say a prayer for him. He's ill. He's not doing it. He's doing okay, but he's ill. And he's in the recovery mode now. Let's hope he does well. He says to me, Tony, he says, we're starting a school here, et cetera, and we're looking for some people to coach. And your name was brought in to help us coach to develop a soccer program. I was very honored, but it wasn't the boys' club. But I was very honored. And then I got another phone call from my principal at St. Anthony High School, Father Crudeli. You guys know that. Father Crudeli says to me, underneath, right, Tony? Yeah. He said, they're opening a school in St. Paul, in Bristol, St. Paul. He said, my heart is broken. He said, because St. Anthony's was going to be eliminated. And he said, but he says, it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful Catholic high school. He says, and St. Anthony's is a young man, but St. Paul will be a big young boy. St. Anthony will be a big man. He says, and I'd like to have you apply there. The rest is history. I went looking at for the paperwork. I went to apply, and I did my thing. And lo and behold, Father O'Brien calls me in for an interview. True story. And I says, now they must have known everything about me before I got to the interview, you know? And so he calls me in. He says, we have an opening here in the physical education department and head soccer coach. I love it. That's what I want to do. I want to coach. I want to coach, and I want to teach, and et cetera. He says, and also there'll be some biology. I said, I want to do it. I'll do it. And to make the story short, he said, you got the job. And he shook my hand. He shook my hand. He says, congratulations, you got the job. Well, I'm a young guy. I got a wife and a child, and maybe one on the way. I says, thanks, Father. You start the school year. Well, I'm waiting. It's going to be my son. They never told me. So I went home and I said, June, we got a job. We're going to move back to Bristol. And I'm going to be teaching and coaching at St. Paul High School. She said, oh, great. What's your salary? I said, I don't know. He never told me my salary. Tom, you can relate to that. You know, Father. I said, he never told me. He said, you took the job? I said, yeah, of course I took the job. I took it. Yeah, I took it. And I says, I didn't know what to do. I had to run the basics to find out. I had to call up to Don Perno. I had to call Father Crudeli at St. Anthony's. I said, do I really have this job? I says, to make the story short, that's how my career started. And I loved it. Never looked back. And to this day, I'm the happiest person. I love it. And I met great people, like all you guys in here. Wonderful, and they're still friends. Wonderful people. And that's how my career started at St. Paul. And we built a soccer program in the early 70s, whatever it was. And then in the 80s, we became pretty popular. And the pleasure that I had in coaching was that we had kids that wanted to participate. And how do you tell a kid you can't make a team? How do you tell a kid you don't make a team? And all you guys that are coaches, you know what I'm talking about. How do you say, well, I only could keep 15 guys, or I only could keep 20 guys? How do you tell them that? I couldn't tell them. So I went to Father O'Brien, who gave me a handshake. I said, listen, we have a varsity program, we have a JV program, and we got about 40 kids that want to play freshman soccer. How can I tell 20 of them they can't play? I says, can I start 2 JV programs? He says, of course you can start 2 JV programs. And that's how soccer progressed along the years. We started 2 freshman programs, a JV program, and a varsity program. And from there, we just kept developing, and we were very, very fortunate. We had wonderful kids. We were lucky, but we had some talented kids. And we had people that supported our program, and we were so happy about it. And the rest is history. And here I am, I'm back with my friends. I'm back from Florida, back with my friends, see old faces, the Ziogas, my neighbors, everybody. Tony Carrier, Crazy.
Nice job.
So that was it. That was the story. So thank you all.
Thank you. So, being asked, Matt Crowley contacted me, told me to contact Bob, and then I get to look back on my high school career, which I really didn't want to do, and it was very mixed. At St. Paul, I was during the transition period, 74, 75 state champions, I think 88 state basketball champions. We were really bad, and in baseball we were 500. But I would like to touch what Stacy said about growing up in the 80s. It's like, you know, my hero was my uncle, and it was Mike Giovinazzo. I worked with Mike when I was like 10 years old. He would pick me up, I'd go keep score at Rockwell Park. The basketball games get like $1 a game or something, and buy me ice cream once in a while. And so
the pride of playing in Bristol meant everything to me. And later, when they were like 50 and I had just turned 30 or maybe 45, there's the over 30 league, and they asked me to play, and that was like asking me to play for the Boston Red Sox or the Yankees or something. It was really quite an honor and very nerve-wracking because my uncle would just beat me if I did something wrong. So this has been a great opportunity, and to play sports in Bristol meant something, and it was bad because I was thinking about Legion, and I'm like, gee, I wish I just played better for Coach Burns. That's all I have left. So, Jim.
First of all, thanks for having me. I had a great time running down memory lane when Frank called me and asked me to come over and sit on this panel. And when I found out Tommy Burns was going to be here, I knew that he was going to try and buy my minutes. So anyway, I wanted to talk a little bit about football. That was the first thing that came to mind. I was just a mediocre football player when we were first started, when I was a freshman in high school. And we had running back after running back in the early 80s that you guys, Gary Pearson was my freshman year, followed by Carl Hall and Chuck Nolan and Billy Parks. And those guys, just everybody looked up to them. And Bristol was like this town that everybody looked up to. And then when I went to college, everybody said, oh, Bristol. And Bristol was like the greatest thing going. We like the legends that I looked up to with Coach Pirog and Coach Bragaki and Coach G and Mr. T, Coach Krampitz and Zai, all these guys. It was just an amazing thing. And people really looked up to Bristol. And it was great to come back and great to have fun. I went to grad school. My first job out of grad school was at a prep school in Wallingford, and I'm like, just so out of my element that I just couldn't be there. I mean, I had actors and football players. John Madden's kids were in my first class. I'm like, what am I doing here? I want to go back to Bristol. This is not for me. So anyway, that was fun. Football was just a blast. I promised Ryan I wouldn't mention how many times we won the whole game, so I'm not going to say that. But baseball-wise, we all, I don't want to say that we had like average teams in Bristol, St. Paul and Bristol Eastern and Bristol Central, but when we merged together to play Legion and played for Coach Burns, greatest time of my life. Everybody had fun. We had a blast playing. We stayed in touch with everybody afterwards. We added Plainville High School after with Ricky Olek and Jeff Howes, and just had great baseball teams. During the early 80s, at least, none of us won any championships. I know that there was late 80s. Maybe, Coach G, did you win a championship in the 80s?
86.
86. Okay, I was long gone. Anyways, but everybody looks up to Bristol. Everybody looks up to Bristol athletes. I went to Eastern Connecticut and played for one of the meanest coaches that he'd ever played for. Phil Holloway was just a tough guy. But at one game, we had 7 guys from Bristol starting. We had Mike DeLucia up there, and Nick Vita, Mike Riola, Ishmael Roman. One starting lineup had 7 Bristol guys, and we went to the World Series that year too. So, but you don't forget a lot of those things. I had the pleasure of playing golf with Johnny Benziger today. He came down to play some golf. We still stay in touch. I played with Reinhardt last year. And I think the friendships that we built there in the 80s have been amazing. Tommy Legassi, who I haven't seen for a long time, lived up the street from me. I grew up in a neighborhood where my backyard touched Jimmy Bates' backyard, and Peter Brown, who was the quarterback at St. Paul, and Bobby Wilson, and Ricky Hamill lived with Bobby Wilson. That was my neighborhood. We'd get up in the morning, as soon as the sun was up, and go out and play. We didn't have laptops and cell phones and all that stuff. And Mom said, when the lights come on, get home. That's how it was. And we'd meet each other up on Jimmy Bates had a basketball court in his backyard. We built a little Fenway Park in Bobby Wilson's backyard. And that was, the joys of playing Bristol. I got a call from Coach Freemuth. I don't remember the year, probably early 90s, and his son was playing baseball at Trinity, and he said, they get some catchers that need some development. Why don't you come on over and help these guys out? So I coached at Trinity for a few years and had a blast over there. But all of those ties, even though we don't like Plainville and never did like Plainville, I was telling these guys before, and we despise Coach Jones. I know he's not here tonight. And I get to Easter, I'm like, yes, hang on. Junior year, Holabody walks in with Ronnie Jones and says, I want you guys to meet our new assistant coach, Ronnie Jones. No, I got a transfer. But all great stories, all great thoughts, and it was just fun to kind of go down memory lane about Bristol in the 80s and how long ago it was. I just turned 60, Tommy just turned 60, you probably just turned 60, Benziger just turned 60, so we're old men now. We're old men. But anyways, thank you guys for the memories. Coach Brady, thank you.
So, I'm sitting here, I feel like it's Thanksgiving at my mother-in-law's house. When I was asked to do this, I did some thinking, okay? The 80s were really special. I think in Bristol, we went from accepting being a conference champion to being a state champion, all right? And I was thinking, must have been something in the water when these athletes were being conceived, okay? And then I listened to Stacy. Stacy made some real good points, okay? She really did. And then I look around this room and I see who the coaches were. And I'm saying to myself, none of these people here were born with a silver spoon in their mouth, okay? It's where they came from, okay? They learned from their family that if you want to be better, you have to do this, okay? And they simply passed it along to the athletes, okay? And I think that's why we got so good, okay? So not only to the athletes in the 80s, but to you coaches, okay? You're special people. You know what? These summer travel teams, they drive me crazy, okay? They really, really do. They've forgotten what it's all about. And I think more kids have learned more things at the Boys Club and on sand lots, okay, entire basketball courts, than they do paying $3,000, $4,000 for traveling around, okay? And they win more state championships than you can imagine. I thank you very much. While they have the microphone, I'll tell you one Tom Burns story, okay? Believe it or not, Tommy played football, freshman football, okay? He was a giant of a man, about 3'10", okay? And I kept him. And I'm going to tell you why I kept him.
You can play center now.
The right side of the line you can play. Anyways, I'm coming off the field one day, and back then, parents really kept their distance. Right? They weren't near huddle. Okay, they weren't on their mobile devices, you know, killing you. Right? And there's Tommy's dad, okay, Jerry, okay, and his uncle Larry, okay, that I knew. And I'm going by them, and they said, hey, Phil, you know, would you like a beer? And, you know, we were forming a booster club at that time. And Tom's dad said, what do you need? I said, you know, we really could use an ice machine. No problem. A couple days later, ice machine shows up at the school. Okay, very nice. The only problem, it was so hot, the ice would melt, okay? Oh, they don't get the hot part, all right? All right. Thank you very much.
Before I open it up, Tom, you want to respond to any of that at all? Or?
I can't remember back that far.
Tell them about your quarterback sneak, Tommy.
Yeah, well, I will tell you this. So,
I knew it.
I was teeny. I was the smallest kid. The reason I got into sports, you know, but you're in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and they pick teams, and you're the last one picked always. And like the gym teachers weren't taught then that you're supposed to go, okay, let's count off by 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. They go, no, Joey, you run. Well, they say, I hope you should run the team. And of course, Mark didn't like me, so Mark put me last because I was little. So So anyway, I go last, and I remember that growing up. And so so I go out for football. My father's a football guy, and I'm telling you right now, I was 4'9", and I was 90 pounds. And he goes, and I'd have to do field drills with Rocco Testa, David, Dennis Hernandez, because in the fall everybody hangs out together. And my father goes, "You jump in there, you show me you're a man." So when I got up, all my bones were broken. I get back up, and they go, "Who's getting in line?" They go, "I'll get coach." It was crazy. And then these guys are nuts. You think Papace is nuts? This guy, I'll tell a story later about it. But, so he puts me in a game. I get in one game, okay, freshman year. The last game of the season, Eastern, we had a real good team, but we're playing Eastern. We had probably 50-0, like we always were against Eastern. So he puts me in. I was the backup quarterback. So he goes like this, and he puts me in for one play. Dick Caruso, my buddy, is the running back, and it's his only play too. Last game of the season, there's no time, barely any time on the clock. I'm at the 1 yard line going, yeah. What do you think happened?
You got Caruso.
Fumble! Dick won't let me forget it.
Anybody? Anybody have anything to share this evening?
Does Tom remember first base, the lead? Remember the day before we were talking about getting a good lead off of first base, getting over, getting ready. Do you remember that happened?
I remember a picture in our yearbook that shows after I got picked off, me back, with my head down.
Well, what happened was, if you remember, and you're very honest with this, you took the lead, and we had gone over it the day before the fundamentals, and all of a sudden you get picked off, and I said, "What's going on?" You're walking back, and afterwards you said, "I thought I had a good lead. I was looking over at you to see if I was that far away, and I didn't see the pitcher throw the ball." But I admired your honesty. It was very good.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Come on.
Tony's got to have a story. Come on, Tony. You're good for a story. You got to have one.
I'm trying to think of a halfway decent one. Well, I remember when we put stands at St. Paul's, when we played soccer. So I used to get the kids all around, but I didn't Tony. And Tony's, he was a good coach. But we had battles with St. Paul's at Muzzy Field. And their players were, Tony had the, not the privilege, but he could get from the surrounding towns, and that used to drive us crazy because we couldn't recruit. So, but we got along. We had some battles at Muzzy Field. I remember one in the rain, and it was, like you say, you get all the coaches together, all the players together. You're enemies at the time, but when the game is over, all's well and good, and you shake hands and go wait for the next game to come up, and always great competition with Tony and even at Easter. Same thing, great battles.
That was the first mention of Muzzy Field. How lucky are we to have that as your home field? You played George Scott League and Tom Monahan leagues at Muzzy Field, football, soccer, leagues in baseball. One of the greatest facilities in the state, I think,
Well, Major League players played there.
Yeah.
Major League players played at Muzzy Field.
So one thing that stands out in my memory, and I had a lot of great memories playing sports in Bristol, was Coach Rooney was my high school coach. I was senior captain on the football team, and we had a bad game against Maloney or something. And film Monday, he ripped into me, and I've never been so humiliated in my life. He said, "Benzinger, you're lower than whale shit, and whale shit is at the bottom of the ocean, so you can't get any lower." So you imagine telling a kid in this day and age that, and them accepting it and trying to get better from it.
This is Mr. Benzinger, so I would follow up with a story I remember. I was coaching freshman football, and I came down as we got prepped for Easter. And the infamous Thomas J. Burney said, "We got to do a 360 here." And Benzinger was the only one that had the guts to say, "Coach, we do a 360. We're doing a circle right back where we started."
I learned to keep my mouth shut.
Howie?
I remember with John playing in the Monahan League one night. Being the director, I often had an umpire, so I'm umpiring the plate that night. And he's catching, and somebody's coming around third base.
That was me.
And they have quite a collision. And I said to myself, that's malicious. I kicked them both the hell out of the game. And they looked at me and they said, what are you doing that for? That was a joke.
The best part of that story is that we were playing basketball that day in his driveway. And we decided that we were both catching, it was the Cubs against the Eagles. And we decided that first pitch, we were going to throw a fastball to each other. And Benzie missed his, and I hit mine into the road in front of Eastern. And he was joking around with me coming, and he jumped one way and I jumped the other way. And we got all tangled up and fell down in a pile on the ground.
Yeah, exactly. So we both on it again.
Hey, Hal, I think we need that pretty boy story again. Come on.
All nice.
Oh, that's a good one.
I told this story a few years ago at the Doubletree. We're playing at Hall High School, and it was the bottom of the sixth inning, and we had a one-run lead. And Hall had the base, or Hall, it was West Hartford Legion had the bases loaded with 2 outs. And this bullet is hit out to right center field, and Reinhardt was in center field. And Reinhardt, he hated to run, but boy, he was fast. You don't want, if you ask him to jog around the field, he's going to be the last guy. But if it was time for a sprint and there was punishment involved, the extra, he was first. So he could fly. And Reinhardt just makes this amazing, stretched out, parallel to the ground, face first into the fence. And he's just down on the ground. And that saved, 3 runs, 4 runs from scoring. We went on and won the game the whole bit, but I was a little lighter then. I was the first one out there. And Reinhardt hit the fence with his face, and he rolls over and he looks at me, obviously concussed, but what did concussions mean in the 80s? Come on.
3 bones.
Shake it off, suck it up. He rolls over and looks at me, and am I still pretty?
Al, the question's been, how about wrestling? Ammonia capsules, that's what it is. Ammonia capsules, everybody?
Salt pills.
Salt pills, ammonia capsules. How about wrestling in the 80s?
I only could talk for because that's what I was. I mean, we had some battles with Eastern all the time. And as Phil and Tony always call the parents, it's a cult. It's not like going to a basketball game. It's not like going to a soccer match. It's a cult. You think big time wrestling's bad, you got to see a mother when her son's out there wrestling. We had success in the 80s, a lot of success. I remember the first time we were having a tournament, and Phil and I hooked up, we had to run a tournament. And Phil volunteered to run the concession stand. We had all those girls in there. That's the same year we both won championships. But a few stories, I'll tell you a couple of stories that still amaze me. First one, we're in a tournament at our school, and Groton High School's there, and they've got these transfers from Pennsylvania, because it's a Navy, the Navy mix is down there. And these kids come in and they got to weigh in. Back then, you can weigh in, you get 3 tries to make weight. So this kid steps on the scale from Groton. He's an 1/8 of a pound over. The referee says, you're an 1/8 over. Kid jumps off the scale, goes over there and stands on his head. Gets back up, he's on the scale. He made weight. Now, I taught science for 30 years. I still don't understand how that's one story. The other story is, we were so tight with the parents at that time in '85. I mean, they took their kids everywhere. The Boys Club had the program, and they went all over the state. Sometimes they went to New York, Pennsylvania with kids to wrestle. So they were very close. So during the season, they're all cutting weight. And I mean, they're dead. They can't go out. They win a match. Basketball team wins a match, they go to McDonald's. Wrestling team wins a match, they go out, but they don't eat. They don't eat. So this one mother, Italian mother, Makes real good Italian food. Her son would wake up in the middle of the night, go to the refrigerator, open the door, look, close the door, wouldn't take any food, cut and wait. Every night, go to the refrigerator. So she comes up to me while we're practicing, or just before a match. Can you talk to my son, see what's going on? So I said, Michael, your mom said you're getting up, open the refrigerator, and close it. Yeah. Well, what are you doing? He goes, I open the door, I inhale real deep, close the door. I mean, those kids are so dedicated because they have to cut weight, they couldn't go out with their friends and eat, and they still do that. It's amazing. But there were all kinds of stories, but that's the best one.
Pete?
Tommy Burns mentioned 74 Legion squad, first to go to the World Series. So the way my brain works, I went right back to it, and I said to Mark, the last game to go to the World Series, we were playing a team from Massachusetts. We were winning, killing them, like 10-2 in the 6th inning, and the lights went out. I don't know if anybody was here.
There was an accident out.
The lights went out, and they said, if we can't finish the game, you guys aren't going, because the other team had more wins. But anyway, long story short, while this delay is going on, Bristol packed the stadium with their fans, and all of these little kids were leaning over the dugout to ask us for autographs. We're 17 years old, and that's the only autograph I ever signed in my life. Since Mark, did you ever sign an autograph? I don't know, but thanks, Tommy, for that. So I have signed an autograph.
Thank you.
Lindsay.
I think Bristol, it has been really, it's someone mentioned before about being a sports town. It really is. It's been very influential for me, a lot of my friends. For me, seeing those four guys right there, every time I think of Bristol, I think those four guys right there, Bills, Tetro, Timonazzo, Cranberries, that might be, that's home for me. So when I see them, feels like back in high school and stuff like that. But Stacey mentioned a good point about there wasn't much else going on, so you had sports was just your outlet. Growing up on Davis Drive, sports was our life. Being sports, playing baseball and football and basketball, and you just want to compete. I think nowadays technology gets in the curse of these kids. It's tough. Having a younger kid that's trying to push them to just get out of the house and go play golf or do something outside of the house. But being in Bristol has been a blessing. It really has. Listen to all the stories, and a lot of times we don't have that. I work for high school basketball and football, and it's a different element. The kids are different. Like you say about AU, it's not helping you. It's just the parents are crazy, the kids are crazy. You don't just play. During the summer, you just go Rocco Park, Free Park, just play and get better. They don't do that anymore. It's a different. So growing up where we grew up, it's been a blessing. I'm proud of being from Bristol, so it's a good thing.
It's a great point. I think last month I was coming up here for a meeting, and I went by, Coach G, I went by the park by St. Joseph's, and I looked at the field, and there were 6 kids and 16 parents. Something's wrong. 6 kids playing and 16 parents watching. We grew up, it's just the other way around. There wasn't a parent around. And you had to get home when the lights came on. So.
Because it's 6%
Davis Drive down here. Everybody was welcome wherever we went. And we used to bring teams and play down there, and they come up here, and it was fun. It was fun. I'll never forget it.
Yeah, I don't know how it is now, but I remember that we never missed the Bristol Central Bristol Eastern game, no matter what the sport. Right. We were there for volleyball. We were there for soccer. We played baseball, football. We were involved. We never missed the basketball game.
Bigger property, we go to all the girls games. That was Southern City, Bristol, Eastern. That was girls. That was.
I didn't go to Central or Eastern, but I never missed the Thanksgiving game.
Yeah.
That's where you met everybody.
Good point. Good point.
Mark?
We're talking about how great a town Bristol is to grow up in, and it is, and it was. And I was fortunate because, I had 5 brothers, so, one bedroom, but that's right. If you were in a slump, you weren't hitting or something, the coaches weren't that involved with you at that point. We had a bucket of balls. Johnny, Jimmy, we'd go up to Central High School, and we would just work on it ourselves. That was, you didn't need coaches. We had And I was fortunate that, you know, and then my older brothers, you know, they hung out with, you know, Mike G and, you know, Davey Rapp and all those guys. So when I'm 18, I get to play with these guys, and, you know, Mike was coaching at Eastern, now I'm playing with him. And everyone says, well, these guys must have like been coaching there. And I said, you know what? They weren't there to coach, they were there to play. Mike was there, he wasn't coaching me, you know, he's older now, obviously, than me, a lot older, but, you know. But, you know, I'm a teammate, we're not. But you know what? He never coached me verbally, but he did physically, because I would watch what he was doing, and I would watch the guys, you know, and you saw how they behaved and how they acted, you know, the way, you know, he's still running sprints out there, he's still, you know, doing whatever the stuff's supposed to be done, and you know, it becomes part of you. You say, that's how you gotta do it, you know. He never told me, you know, do this, but I watched, you know, and I saw. You know, we had got Luke Lambeau, you could just see the way that guy can hit. I mean, I'm not sure he was a role model, but the guy could hit. But, you know, Mike just took it serious, he knew, you know, and Duke Snyder, I mean, he did some things that were just, they were, not physically, but mentally, they were amazing. I mean, I can remember one game we're playing at the Page Park, and Duke's on second base, and he's running home on a base hit, and all of a sudden he pulls up, and he's like got a hamstring pull. So he comes, he's limping in, he touches home, and I said, Duke, you all right? He goes, yeah, fine. I said, I thought you pulled your hamstring. He goes, no, I missed third base. He says, so I stopped. And I'm thinking, now they're going to know I missed third base because I hesitated. So he faked like he pulled the hamstring. But that was also the guy that, he knew his batting average as he was running down to first base. Every time he got a hit, he knew what he was batting when by the time he got to first base. But those guys were, you know, for me it was great. You know, I was still 18, you know, playing in college, and these guys were all out of college, but I learned a lot in the summer leagues, you know. You got to play against good competition, and it's been a great town to grow up in. And I was fortunate enough to have a lot of people to play with. And even, you know, Sunday mornings down the boys club. I mean, every Sunday morning it was, you know, we had a group of guys that I got to start when I was 16 because, you know, these guys were all older, but my older brothers, I went along with them and got to play 16 years old down at the boys club. And you didn't miss. I mean, it was, you went there every Sunday. And we had one game with Freddie Seratore tears his Achilles. Well, we only have 11 guys, right? So he's got to go to the hospital. Nobody drives him to the hospital. He had to drive left-footed to himself to the hospital.
And everybody took their frustration from 7 to 9 on our rap. Coach Mills.
Yeah, I just had a few things to say. Obviously, coaching a long time, I'm looking around at the few Eastern guys that are here, and it's amazing the people that are here. I think of Stacy and Lindsay, they're both in the same class. That was probably one of the closest classes. They were just amazing in everything. The spirit in that class is incredible. But my son Steve got to play as a sophomore, and luckily he had Lindsay as a receiver because he could throw the ball a little bit, but he'd throw the ball 10 yards and it would be a 60-yard play, which was great for stats for the quarterback and also for the receiver. But Lindsay was just a tremendous leader and terrific. And next to him is Reinhardt. And I think of his team, and with Dougie Pina and some of the other guys that played on that team, and it was just a great bunch of people that played all the time. Always gave you everything they had. And I look over here at Pete Losey, and I can still see him back here talking. He had Pete organized a reunion this year of the 19 set. Look at this, speaking of the devil. Here he is.
Just like saying Beetlejuice. 7 o'clock. Just like saying Beetlejuice.
It's still Pete Losey was the famous team where that we won on Thanksgiving. One of the
Don't bring it up.
When was it? Pete, you got to tell a couple stories about that. I mean, I can still see you in the end zone cheering, doing everything. So just tell a story about that, and maybe Lindsay, you can tell a story about it, or maybe Reinhardt can. we thought that Jay Ray would be here tonight and talk a little bit about the championship game we won. And again, that was a series of kids that you had. You talked about chemistry, etc. I still think of our offensive line in that particular team. We had some good skilled people with Timmy Gunn, Craig Sequeira, and Jay Ray, and etc. Bobby Dion. But we had lineman Joe Morelli was maybe 195 pounds. We had Bobby Dion, Mike Dion rather was. Mike was what, 175 pounds, 5'8", starting guard. And it's incredible that it was just a situation, and Jack can attest to this, because obviously he was coaching with us. You get a group of kids as a coach, and you don't get a lot of them, where they all seem to blend together. They may not be the greatest athletes, but all of a sudden they're playing for each other. They believe in each other, and all of a sudden it's such a pleasure to score.
Well, thanks a lot for coming tonight. Glad you made it, Doug. Appreciate it. You want to say anything? There's plenty of beer and wine out there, and I'd like to thank the committee for sharing the stories and everybody participating. Yeah, in the Hall of Fame, thanks a lot. And like I tell my son, who lives in Pennsylvania, these guys I'm sure will agree to that. You can take the kid out of Bristol, but you can't take Bristol out of the kid. And that's evident tonight for sure. So thanks a lot. And,